Most gardeners reach for a spray bottle. The moment they spot a caterpillar on their kale, avian intelligence spent years doing the same thing until the birds showed up and made the spray bottle irrelevant. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started with a single observation. Every morning around 10 a.m., a wave of birds would sweep through the vegetable beds, methodically working through the foliage. Within 20 minutes, the aphid population that had been building on the bean plants was gone. No spray, no intervention, just birds doing what birds have always done. That is the argument this article is going to make. Not that birds are harmless, but that they are actively, measurably useful, and that most of the damage gardeners attribute to birds is actually a symptom of a problem that birds, given the right conditions, will solve themselves. The pest control case is stronger than you think. The evidence for birds as biological pest control isn't anecdotal. A 2012 study published in Science by researchers at the University of Groningen found that insectivorous birds reduce arthropod populations by an average of 50% in the areas they actively forage. A separate meta-analysis in Ecology Letters covering 131 studies confirmed that bird predation significantly suppresses herbivorous insect populations across a wide range of ecosystems. For gardeners, this translates directly California scrub jays, towhees, robins, house wrens. These are not decorative visitors. They are working animals. Towhees in particular are exceptional at controlling cabbage worms and hornworms, scratching through leaf litter and soil to find larvae that would otherwise destroy brassicas. Wrens consume extraordinary quantities of beetles, flies, and caterpillars relative to their body size. A single pair of Carolina wrens feeding nestlings can remove over 500 insects from a garden in a single day. The historical record makes the stakes clear. During China's Great Leap Forward in 1958, the government launched a campaign to exterminate sparrows on the grounds that they were consuming grain. The campaign succeeded. The sparrows were largely eliminated. What followed was a locust explosion of catastrophic proportions. The insects the sparrows had been suppressing multiplied without check, contributing to a famine that killed tens of millions of people. The sparrows were eating grain. They were also eating the things that would have eaten everything else. Why birds peck your tomatoes, and how to stop it. Here's the part that changes how most gardeners think about bird damage. When birds peck holes in tomatoes, cucumbers, or grapes, they are almost never after the food. They are after the water. This is a critical distinction. A bird that is adequately hydrated has very little motivation to damage fruit. The damage is a symptom of thirst, not appetite. And thirst is a problem that is far easier to solve than appetite. Avian intelligence tested this directly. After installing a birdbath near the vegetable beds, positioned in partial shade, with a gentle slope and textured surface for grip, fruit damage dropped noticeably within 2 weeks. The birds were still present in the same numbers. They were simply no longer using the tomatoes as a water source. The birdbath placement matters more than most people realize. Near cover is essential. Birds are prey animals, and they will not use a water source that leaves them exposed. Partial shade keeps the water cooler and reduces evaporation. A recirculating element, even a simple solar-powered fountain, keeps the water moving, which both attracts birds. They can hear and see moving water from a distance, and significantly reduces mosquito breeding. Standing water without circulation becomes a mosquito nursery within days. A lesson learned the hard way. One summer that produced a mosquito season nobody wants to repeat. One practical note from the comments that is worth taking seriously: clean the bird bath frequently. Birds bathe and defecate in the same water, and a dirty bath will be abandoned. Some gardeners find that a simple dog bowl in the shade, refreshed daily, outperforms an elaborate bird bath that gets cleaned once a week. The native plant foundation, the single most consistent piece of advice from experienced bird gardeners, and the one that appears most reliably in the research, is this: native plants are the foundation everything else builds on. This isn't just about aesthetics or ecological principle. It is about food web structure. A 2007 study by entomologist Doug Tallamy at the University of Delaware found that native oak trees support over 500 species of caterpillars. Non-native ornamental trees of similar size support fewer than 5. Birds feeding nestlings need caterpillars, not seeds, not berries. Caterpillars. And caterpillars exist in meaningful numbers almost exclusively on native plants. What this means practically: a garden full of non-native ornamentals, even one with excellent feeders and a beautiful bird bath, will support far fewer birds than a garden with a modest selection of native shrubs and trees. The feeders attract birds. The native plants make the garden a place where birds can actually raise young, which is what converts occasional visitors into year-round residents. Coneflowers, rudbeckia, bee balm, and native grasses provide seed heads that birds forage through winter. American beautyberry produces fruit that attracts dozens of species. Native sunflowers, allowed to go to seed rather than deadheaded, become bird feeders that maintain themselves. One gardener described placing spent sunflower heads on the ground after they expired, which simultaneously fed the birds and encouraged more blooming on the remaining stalks. 2 outcomes from one action: supplemental feeding. What actually works? Feeders are supplemental, not foundational. That distinction matters. A garden with excellent native plant coverage and reliable water will have birds, regardless of feeders. A garden with only feeders and no habitat will have birds that visit briefly and leave. That said, feeders do meaningful work when used correctly. The most important variable is seed quality. Generic big box bird seed mixes are typically dominated by milo and millet, filler grains that most desirable bird species ignore, leaving them to pile up on the ground, where they attract rats and house sparrows, an invasive species that actively destroys native bird nests. The nutritional comparison is stark. A quality seed mix built around sunflower hearts, peanuts, safflower, and pumpkin seeds will show protein content around 18%, fat around 40%, roughly double or more the nutritional density of a generic mix. Birds fed higher quality seed show better body condition, particularly important during breeding season and winter. Shell-free mixes solve a secondary problem: the germination issue. Seed with shells that falls to the ground will sprout, producing an unplanned garden of sunflowers and millet in places you didn't intend. Shell-free seed doesn't germinate, which keeps the area under feeders manageable. The squirrel problem is real and worth addressing directly. Slim poles are harder to climb than standard posts. Red pepper extract, capsaicin, on seed deters squirrels and other mammals effectively. They can taste it. Birds cannot. The capsaicin receptor that makes hot things hot is simply absent in birds, so the extract has zero effect on them, while being genuinely unpleasant for everything else, giving birds a reason to stay. Water and food bring birds in, structure makes them stay. The difference between a garden that birds visit and a garden that birds inhabit is cover. Dense plantings that provide shelter, escape routes, and nesting sites. A bird that can flee to cover within a few wing beats of a water source will use that water source constantly. A bird that has to cross open ground to reach it will use it rarely. Birdhouses extend this logic to nesting. The key mistake most gardeners make is buying generic birdhouses that don't match the cavity dimensions required by the species they want to attract. Entrance hole diameter, interior dimensions, and mounting height are all species-specific. Resources like NestWatch.org provide exact specifications for every cavity, nesting species by region. The difference between a birdhouse that sits empty for years and one that is occupied within a season. Placement matters as much as design. Near a compost bin is ideal for wrens and other insectivores. The decomposing material generates a constant supply of flies, beetles, and larvae that the birds will harvest 5 to 10 feet off the ground, away from branches that give predators easy access. Facing away from prevailing weather. The no-spray commitment. Everything above is undermined by insecticide use. This is non-negotiable. Insecticides don't selectively kill pest insects. They kill insects. The insects that birds eat. A garden treated with broad-spectrum insecticides will have fewer pests in the short term and far fewer birds in the medium term, which means more pests in the long term, requiring more insecticide. In a cycle that ends with a garden that is chemically dependent and biologically impoverished. The research on this is unambiguous. Neonicotinoid insecticides in particular have been linked to significant declines in insectivorous bird populations in treated agricultural areas. The mechanism is straightforward. The insects disappear. The birds follow. The alternative isn't tolerating pest damage. It is building a system where the birds do the pest control. That system takes time to establish, typically a full season or two, before the bird population builds to the point where pest pressure is meaningfully reduced. But once established, it is self-sustaining in a way that chemical intervention never is. What is the one change that made the biggest difference for birds in your garden? Was it water, plants, feeders, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what is working for people in different climates and regions.